So my name is Andre. I'm with Washington Water Trails. I'm the executive director. And we were founded in 1990 by a group of paddlers who noticed that all of their favorite paddling spots were being sold or, purchased and weren't accessible any longer. And I like to say I've been paddling for quite a long time since I started as a rafting guide way back in 1975. And then after I rode support down the Colorado River for the Northwest Outdoor Center, they hired me for summer help to teach kayaking and lead kayak trips. So my favorite place we've always been is Jones Island, which is the top picture. And I worked at Lakeside School, an outward boundy program, and we did a lot of service projects. We actually put in the benches and campfire pit there. And then here's another more recent work party out on Jones Island. So I just put that in there because I love Jones. So I have a lot of verbiage in here, and since I'm usually preaching to the choir, I skip over some of it. But where are you two from in the back there?
I'm from Ellensburg, Recreation DNR.
Oh, nice.
Also DNR, typically out of North Bend, currently working at Ellensburg.
Oh, great. Yeah, I went to the DNR strategic planning here earlier in the year, and yeah, you'll see some of our sites are on DNR, and we want to get a new one. I was just telling someone else out on the Hood Canal, out on the Strait of Juan de Fuca. So our mission is through advocacy, education, and stewardship, we protect and promote public access to Washington waterways, shorelines, and marine trails for human-powered craft. And we want to inspire current and future generations to enjoy and take a greater role in protecting the waterways. And I think that pretty much covers it. We have more or less tried to change our mission statement, but the board, likes it the way it is. And so I'm sure you all know, what is a water trail? I'm kind of speaking to the choir here. It's just a route along a river. It's kind of ethereal because it's not like a trail that you hike on and you can see in front of you. We'd like to think that it continues a 5,000-year history of traveling by human-powered boats through the First Nations. And Tom Steinburn over here, we call him one of the two Toms. He was a Boeing engineer in the late 80s, and he is one of the people who noticed that all of his favorite access points were being closed. And so he initiated this along with Tom Deschner. And then Fran Troji just passed away last year. I've known her since the 80s. She was almost a mentor of mine because she got me into the Mountaineers Club to teach whitewater kayaking back in the day, which was kind of hard to get a gig teaching whitewater kayaking. So at least 85% of the population lives within 10 miles of the shorelands. And they visit them a lot every year. So it's important to keep access not just for the boaters, but also just for people in general. And so everybody benefits. So interestingly enough, I didn't find this out until recently, that in 1889, the state dictated that private land could be purchased and owned, and it was for the oyster farmers. The oyster farmers were exporting oysters to San Francisco during the gold rush and whatnot. And this came full circle the other day, well, I should say, within the year, when a woman from Taylor Shellfish Company contacted me and said, well, we're planning on buying some more land, and we have to mitigate it by providing public access. And this is also something that's been happening with the salmon grants through RCO. We've been contacted by them. So I said, well, where do you want to do this? And so she brought me here to Oakland Bay, which is in the South Sound. And this is one of their facilities. And so people would, we're thinking of calling it the Shellfish Trail. People would paddle up in Oakland Bay and, have better access. But of course, yeah, it's down there by Shelton. So it kind of came full circle. But the practice ended up changing again in 1971, so it tightened up where people can't really buy the land anymore, and any new land. And we're about the only state in the nation where this happens, where you have privately owned tidelands. And there's only a few other real water trails, like the Main Island Trail, we were modeled after. So, you go down to the beach and it says private property, no one beyond this point. Of course, there are some, if you really get into the niggliness of it, sometimes you can walk on a beach when the tide is out at median level, but people can still yell at you and call the police, right? So it's not a pleasant experience. So originally, we were formed in 1990, and after that, we also were responsible for all of these other trails, helping with them. So there's the Cascadia Marine Trail up in the San Juans, the Lakes to Locks Trail, which is around Seattle, the Willapa Bay Trail, obviously in Willapa Bay, the Northwest Discovery Water Trail goes up the Columbia, and the Greater Columbia Water Trail is a funny mystery, and then the Lower Columbia Water Trail has been taken over by the Lower Columbia Estuary people in Oregon. And we're in the middle of creating a ArcGIS. Have you know ArcGIS? So a really nice young man actually passed away from cancer, and he got this all up and running for us. So you can see in a bigger scale that we had, there's this trail, Lower Columbia, Willapa Bay, Cascadia Marine Trail, and all these little dots. There's little yellow dots in here for the Lakes to Locks Trail.
No Kitsap Peninsula Water Trails on there.
Yeah. Well, the Kitsap Trail. The Kitsap Marine Trail.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're run by the Kitsap government.
Oh, so that's, I see.
So we don't do any management of it.
Oh, well, no. Okay, this is the ones that you manage. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we have different sites, like this is Anderson Island. This most beautiful site everybody loves on the Cascadia Marine Trail. And then this is the beginning of the Columbia Trail, the Northwest Discovery Trail. And over here I keep pitching Secret Beach, which is by the Elks Club in Ballard, where I hang out quite a bit. We have a Ballard Elks Paddle Club, and they use it for Monday night races. And it's really important because this is actually private property, but it has had public access for so long that we hope that they keep it open. And then Willapa Bay is the next one up. And Maritime Washington just gave us a grant. So I have a grant committee now. Have Paul LaPointe and Deb Lester, who you know. And they applied for a grant for a marine heritage trail to link the Cascadia Marine Trail sites together. So we're going to start with Bainbridge and come up with a narrative, so when people paddle down the east side of Bainbridge and head towards Gig Harbor, there'll be like geology and history and all that sort of thing that they can actually look up. It'll be virtual, on the website. And so the Maritime Heritage has asked that we put all of their logos on all of our materials, so I think it's great. So here's that picture again. So what we do is we maintain water trails, steward, promote, and educate, and then develop. We haven't really been developing too many, but the maintenance is a really big deal, especially on the Cascadia Marine Trail. So I've been trying to get stewards since I've been back. I've been doing this since 2018, first as a volunteer and now as an executive director. I'm trying to get stewards in place to at least check on sites once or twice a year, because you just never know. They're out in remote areas. They're all over the state. And then, of course, we have a lot of signage and a guidebook, which is back at the table for the Cascadia Marine Trail. So this is the one that really takes the most care and feeding. It goes basically from the capital to Canada. And there's a picture of it. And it is over in Kitsap County. It was there, a few sites in Kitsap, it's multi-county basically. And then when Kitsap and John Kuntz, who's a friend of mine, created the Kitsap Trail, they overlaid a few of their sites on top of our pre-existing sites. And of course, a lot of people, you guys all know about the Sailor Sea. It's been here forever. And we've been picking up the name sending it back from the Puget Sound. Does everyone know how the Puget Sound was named? Well, when I was teaching at Lakeside School, we had one of our outward boundary trips in the South Sound, and it was following the path of Peter Puget, because Peter Puget was with Captain Vancouver and all of those people. So that the Puget Sound was named after him. So each site basically needs a bathroom, and then we put in our kiosks, where we have Congressman Larson came to visit one day, and he's pointing at a kiosk. And because of Washington State Parks, where we have our original agreements, we have these other little signs with the kayakers on them. So here's an example of the signs. So I just made new signs, and partially because of the grant from Maritime Heritage, I added their logo at the bottom of each. And then I realized our Washington Water Trails wasn't on them, so I added that. And I added a QR code that goes back to each web page. And then all these stars, and I think there's an example up here, show state parks, Island County, Oak Harbor, the city of Oak Harbor, the city of La Conner. These are all partners of ours, and we have operating agreements with each one of them. So this goes on the kiosk, so when you get there, you can see you're in the right place and what some of the rules are for fires and whatnot. And then on the back, we call this the generic sign that talks about leave no trace, etc. And I changed it one time because the ranger and it was really funny, I met these kids. These kids had paddled over to Blake Island, and they were starting fires using driftwood. Of course, we know that's bad, but the ranger came out and asked them not to, and then he got back later, and they did it again, so he fined them. And then he looked at our sign, and they said, oh, well, the Cascadian Marine Trail people say we can do that. And there was a note that says, build open fires only in designated campfire rings. But he had me change it, to look for specific regulations within each park. So I kind of changed the whole sign for him, which is fine. But we now do have some sites without a restroom, and they're day use sites, and it's kind of a new thing. And I might talk about it later, I'm not quite sure. But the Great Peninsula Conservancy, have you heard of them? Anybody?
Yeah.
Well, they bought up tracts of land using the salmon grant. And the salmon grant says you have to provide public access if we give you this money to buy that land. But it also designates you have to take out all the buildings, including the restrooms. And that kind of gets to me a little bit, and I've been proactive in trying to see if we can get some more restrooms in those lands, because, people are going to show up and use the bathroom, like the bushes.
Yeah.
Maybe leave trash. So we have over 60 sites, actually, and day use sites. This one is DNR. This is up on Cypress Head. It says right there. And do you guys know Paul and Tristan? They're that DNR people up there.
I know Tristan, I know of Paul, and every year I tell myself I'm going to prioritize going out to work with Tristan and getting out to one of the islands, because it sounds fantastic.
Yeah, I know, and they have to go, at certain times, of course, because they also have to manage the forest up there, forest lands. They've been really great. And so this is Camano Island State Park. This was our first one. There's another picture of Camano. Skagit Island State Park. I paddled out there one day. That's my mystic to check on it. We have a new sign, a new kiosk out there now. And this is a brand new kiosk we put in at Bowman Bay. Don Crook and Michael Silence are more or less our trail team. We're trying to find more people to help them. Ironically, I drove down Whidbey a couple weeks ago, and I'd been communicating via email with the ranger there, and they take care of the Deception Pass office also takes care of Skagit Island. And so we had been talking because the steward found some, this is I think kind of funny, but the steward found some thistles and they wanted to take the thistles out because they're on the noxious weed list. So I emailed the ranger, and he said, well, you might have to go through our volunteer program with another Paul. And I said, well, we have an operating agreement that, you know, we re-up every 5 years. And so I sent it to him, and then I had to send him the extension, and then he finally goes, oh, well, you can do whatever you want. You know, but it was quite a few back and forth emails where he wasn't even aware that we have these operating agreements. And so after that, I drove down to the next big state park by the ferry terminal and talked to that. Pardon?
Fort Daisy.
Thank you. And talked to that ranger, and he had come over from Port Townsend, and so I had met him there because I used to live in Port Townsend. And he didn't know that Fort Eby was on the Cascade Marine Trail either, and he didn't know that the kiosks were our kiosks. And it was fine. You know, he was very friendly about it. He goes, oh, wow, you know, sure, you know, come and fix the signs up. So I went to the Tri-Club picnic last week and deployed about 10 signs for people to update for me because I can't get to all of them. So another one of our partners is San Juan Island County Park. There's several sites on the islands there. And Anderson Island Parks Department, different site, and we manage some reservations for that. So I actually programmed in a sort of Airbnb plug-in to WordPress where people can make reservations. Meadowdale Beach is Snohomish County Parks, and this one goes way back. Doug Daler, who retired, used to manage this, and he just loved it. He would bring his pygmy kayak that he made himself down to the beach and, you know, talk to the people and have them sign a log. And when he left, they redid the estuary and they took out the kiosk. So we had to get some volunteers to make a new kiosk and put it down there. So you really have to pay attention.
Yeah, gosh.
And when I guided, I loved taking, especially kids, out to Stewart Island. I don't know if you guys have been out there, any of you. There's a little schoolhouse and a lighthouse and a great hike. So I went to Roach Harbor, and they agreed to be sort of an official day site on the trail because people don't know that, a lot of people don't know you can put in at Roach Harbor and you can park your car. It does cost $10, but it's safe, and it's a lot shorter than going from Friday Harbor.
Oh, gosh,
And then I redid the relationship with City of Oak Harbor. They sent us a cease and desist letter because the city council said no more camping in city parks due to the homeless, you know, population or the transient population. So I had like 5 meetings, and the chief of police was totally on board if I made a new reservation system. So again, we brought up a brand new sign, and Van in the background there, he's a Vietnam vet. But after Vietnam, he spent his whole career making signs. So he made that sign and brought it up. And at the same time, we had these vets from Great Britain that I supported. They paddled from the capital up to Skagway. And you can see some of them lost their legs. And the one, it's kind of in shadows, Kaylee, he was just amazing. He's done so many things. He's got world records rowing across the Pacific. And so he brought this team over, and most of them completed. They got a late start, so a few of them defected up there in Canada, but he made it. And they're just amazing, amazing guys. So here's one of the little maps I made. Well, we just got this site back. They didn't take it away for any reason than the road caved in, so they, on Vashon, they fixed the road, and we got Winghaven back. So half of what we do too are work parties. So Blake Island and Blind Island have annual work parties. And actually last year when we did the work party, it turned out the campsite had been taken out by the king tides. So they got rid of all the logs that were floating around on the beaches and took out a few noxious weeds. And that's Paul Rupert, not Paul McFarland. He was the ranger at Blind, and he's now the volunteer coordinator for Washington State Parks. And he's a really cool guy, totally supports us. And we've often planted these starts of eelgrass out there, moving logs. This was that last team when they took the logs off the beach. And then blind is usually a pretty big work party. It's dwindled a little lately, but it's a poignant because there's this couple that are probably in their 70s that stayed on blind for their honeymoon. And so if I don't send out an email soon enough, they'll like, when's that work party? You know? And this is kind of a tough one because it's really hot and dry out there. And here they are, pulling all kinds of noxious weeds, blackberries and ivy and Scotch broom. So, but people love it. And then we had a little sort of work party at Kinney Point State Park. There is a back trail that you can get in, and that's Margaret. She loves just cleaning up the kiosks and replacing the signage. But you have to have a whole bunch of tools to do that.
Where's Kinney Point?
It's south of, it's on Marystone Island,
Oh,
the south
oh,
point.
okay. Close by.
And I went with them that time. So the Wolf property is another state park. And that's the very first work party. And Tom Steinberg is in the middle there. Oh, look, there's Paula Point.
That's a very little known park. Nobody knows about that park.
I know, and it's actually that kiosk.
What property is it? Yeah, it's just right on, north of the Hood Canal Bridge. And there's, yeah, you have to, you drive up to get a road, by the road, you just drive up about, I don't know, a couple of miles or so. And it's just a little thing, it's on, what, Seven Sisters Road or Three Sisters Road, there's really not even a sign.
Yeah,
But it's mainly because I think of the Marine, it's a Marine Corps, the Marine Park, and,
yeah.
but it's great, I used to take my kids, I just live across the bridge.
Oh.
Took my kids there.
Oh, that's
I'd play on
nice.
the beach and run the rapids and, when the water was draining, yeah, it's a beautiful park.
Well, evidently this whole kiosk has fallen down,
Oh, no.
and we wanted to have a work party, but the ranger had a broken arm, and so it might still be in disarray.
Oh, huh, I haven't been out there in a long time.
And then Meadowdale, there's Van and Mike putting up the new sign. And Jenny likes to paddle around with her friends. She fixed up Joanne Beach. And this is Griffin Bay. This is DNR. It was state parks, but the only way you can get into it, at least for us, is paddling, or when I want to go there, I walk up the beach at low tide. I don't know how the DNR gets in.
Where is that?
That's on San Juan Island, facing east. And people love it, but Susan, that's actually not Susan, it turns out, but she stewards it, and she found these outfitters in there, and they were really not very nice. They said, well, we've got all these sites for us, and if you want a site, you can head up the hill, to the top of the hill. And I said, that's not how it's supposed to work. So we did talk to Tristan about it, and he made a few improvements. And I also talked to most of the outfitters on San Juan Island one day about it. I found out who it might have been, because I did work for a couple of outfitters on San Juan back in the day. So far, I haven't had any complaints about that. But when I was an outfitter, I always get my groups in early at 10 a.m. or 11, and then spend the rest of the day taking day trips or whatever. So here's Skagit again. Lummi is DNR, and the Wake, the Whatcom area kayak people, they take care of that. They even have a permit to take care of the bathrooms. So, but we want to make some improvements out there, but there's a lot of liability, I guess. So they've asked us to wait till they do it, Tristan and. So we have paddles and picnics, and this is at LaConner, another one of our partners at Pioneer Park. And that's Tomas Tabasola. He's our president, and he loves cooking salmon. If I don't show up, he'll often show up to make the salmon. We also had one at Kayak Point County Park, Hope Island South, and yeah. So negotiating new sites is always a big issue, and I don't know if I've talked to any of you about Salt Creek, but this is one of my pet sites because I used to go out there and surf a lot. And this whole beach, I don't know if they have a pointer, but this whole beach right here is owned by the Crescent Beach RV Park. They actually own all of this beach up to about, there's a creek, Salt Creek up there. And they won't let anybody land on their beach if they are not if they don't have a reservation. So people have actually landed there. One girl with a dislocated shoulder, and they're like, "No, you have to go. Get an ambulance someplace else."
Oh my gosh.
And so a lot of us have a real pet peeve with this.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it is really well known, so I can say it. I'm not just denigrating them. I have heard that the couple is retiring and their son's taking over, and he's a little more lenient, but. So I talked to the Parks Department out there, Clallam, about putting in a Cascadia Marine Trail site and expanding out the Strait of Juan de Fuca. And we had it all set up, and then some gal who lives up on the hill wrote a letter to this, and they tabled it till next year because she thought there would be a lot of partying and noise and everything. So I've actually talked to a lot of people here about expanding out the strait and got some new ideas, including the DNR site that's out there. Okay, so here's the Great Peninsula Conservancy. They bought all this land, and our board agreed that we could have day use sites out there. We don't have any signage. I have put them in the book, but people can access the property, but there are no restrooms. So I don't know how many people are actually doing it.
Is this Willamette Bay, or you know where this is?
This is the old Jojoba Boy Scout camp here that we're at. It's a really pretty spot.
Because they just did Misery Point.
Yeah, and Misery Point is
Right.
on there.
Yeah, and we just paddled Misery Point to Willamette Cove. It's about 6
Oh.
miles.
Oh, nice.
You say it's an old Boy Scout camp?
Uh-huh. I think it's called Jojoba, Joe. It's beautiful. We've also sometimes take reporters out for education. We took her out to Hope Island North, which is a state park but not a trail site. Yeah, and we partner with Leave No Trace. We actually used to train trainers and Leave No Trace, but we haven't been doing that lately. So a lot of the land managers, say, like the Bowman Bay, when I went to speak to that ranger, he said, well, no one ever uses the Bowman Bay site. And I said, well, you probably just haven't seen them because they come in late and leave early and they're quiet and they pick up their trash. So I have an old web design background, so we managed to get Salesforce on a grant, the database, and so I programmed in a form on our website, and I always encourage people, if they've even stopped at a site for lunch or the restroom, you can fill in this form and it dumps into Salesforce, and now I can put out a report on pretty much any site. But getting people to do it is really hard. I mean, you can do it right from your phone. So it's in education, long term. So members get the guidebook. I just updated the guidebook, and the Maritime Grant is supposed to help cover it. It costs $6,000 for 350 copies. And I did it all in color this year, so I drove around and took pictures. Because the other pictures were all taken before 2014, and they were all in black and white, so they just looked like black blobs. It drove me nuts. So that's the end of the Cascadia Marine Trail site. Do you have any questions on that one? I threw in a few others.
It's impressive. It really is.
So the Lakes to Locks Trail was also put together in the 90s. And it's more of an urban trail, so it's all day-use sites, except for, I suppose, Lake Sammamish State Park. Here's Secret Beach again, because we like to think of it as the gateway between the Cascadia Marine Trail and the Lakes to Locks Trail. That's our favorite. He was our favorite work party coordinator, Harry, who moved over to Europe. But you can bring tons of kayaks through the locks. And then that's the sign on the secret beach, Carsonites. So I guess I don't have too much on that.
So it's on the, when you get, after you've gone through the locks toward Lake Washington.
Yeah.
Just right in Valley.
I actually should probably put a better map, but we've got two full-scale glossy brochures that we've run out of that have to be completely redone, and that's a huge project, as long as it's also expensive. So I just did 100 copies of this for the trade show, for this conference. It kind of has a abbreviated version of the Lakes to Locks Trail and explains it and all of our partners. I updated all these addresses because they hadn't been updated since the 90s. So this is, it's kind of a cool access for urban people. And I like geocaching. Does anyone else do geocaching? It's kind of like old now, but I made a geocache trail from Lake Union out to Secret Beach, which is accessible by boat and bike and probably wheelchair even. And so it's fun. It's fun having your own geocache because people send you little notes like, we found it and this is great and this is the most beautiful place we've ever seen. So, okay, then we have the Northwest Discovery Trail, which is the one that goes from basically Stevenson up to the Clearwater here. And that does go through a lot of different agency lands. So it exists, but it doesn't get that much use. And I did go down to Stevenson by request to give this talk. So that's why I added it. They said they wanted to have a water trail, and I said, but you already have a water trail. And I found out, I had to do a little research, but I found out a man named Bob Burko was the impetus for the thing. The Army Corps of Engineers and other agencies really helped. And a man from the Army Corps came to my talk in Stevenson and said he even had a lot of our Carsonite stakes that were left over, and we ended up getting them. Although they're not as useful because they, when you go up the Columbia, you might know, there's numbers. So you're at this number, then you're at that number, and so they all have numbers on them. So it goes all the way up, and these guys, this couple, they actually paddled from Pink House to Little Goose Dam, which I don't know exactly where that is, even though well, it's up there. I did get that. I did get the map. So Pink House to Little Goose Dam. So they paddled quite a long way and said, of course, the shuttle was the worst part. And every so often they didn't want to camp on the shore because it was too dirty and cluttered and there were other people there. So they ended up camping on little islands to stay away from people. But I did a lot of support with them to help them on their way. And these are all the people who originally helped put that water trail together, a lot of agencies. And then the Willapa Bay Trail, this one really reminds me of a kind of a virtual trail because there is no signage that I've ever been able to find. So Larry Warnberg, though, I talked to him on the telephone. He had an oyster farm and he was the original chairperson. And this was also endorsed by Washington State Parks and the commissioners. Matter of fact, they made this brochure. So that needs, a little care and feeding. And I haven't been able to get out to Long Island or get anybody to go to Long Island to see if there are signs out there. I heard there are, but so far nobody's mentioned that. But I did drive around and I found all the other sites. So you really have to be careful of mud when you go there, of course. You don't want to get stuck in mud. That's dangerous. But there's some nice places, and I had some good oysters. There's a place where you can get barbecued oysters, which are my favorite. And the peninsula, Kitsap Peninsula, Water Trail. They did a great job, and they were able to get designated as a national water trail really quickly. And that was partly because I think the county and the government is behind the maintenance and everything of it. Whereas Washington Water Trails applied, and I was at one of those meetings, and they said, but how can you take care of all of your trail sites? This one woman who was in charge said, and I said, well, we have stewards, but that's one reason why I've been trying to increase the stewardship program, is to give them more faith that we could be a national water trail like the Kitsap. So, and I think that is actually my last slide. Thanks to Susan Conrad. If you've never read her books, any of her books, she's just an excellent writer. She paddled solo up the Inside Passage as a personal journey. So it's a really good book. And thanks to Joel Rogers, too. He's a friend of mine, and he wrote The Hidden Coast a long time ago. Where he's a professional photographer, so he paddled the Cascadia Marine Trail. And I wanted to put a state parks picture on the new guidebook and brochure, so I asked him, and he donated this picture for me, which is Jones Island, ironically. So I have all these brochures. I just updated these 3 for this conference, and we have a lot of the Northwest Discovery brochures, so I didn't do that one. But is there any questions? Or are there any questions? It's like death by PowerPoint. I don't know how else to do it.
Oh, when we have to do it, it's just kind of like.
Great to submerge it. All 4 of us.
Are you trying to get sections of the beach to be public, or just like access points to get onto the waterway?
Could you say that again, please?
So we just got out of a presentation from Oregon, where Oregon has, it's the entire beach was public access. So like you could walk along the entire beach and it'd be public access. Is that something that like you see happening in Washington, or is it you're just trying to get access points onto the beach so that to access the water trails that you have in the water?
Yeah, it's going to be really hard. Like, sometimes I think, wow, if Washington changed the rule and all of a sudden everybody's private land became public, they probably wouldn't even need us anymore, for advocating. But, it just depends on who owns that beach, if they're going to let you walk on it. I mean, one of the guides that I used to work with in the San Juans, we led whale watching trips together. He still lives at I think it's called West Beach on Orcas Island. And he said that he used to lead trips down to this beach. I don't know, I always call it Honeymoon Beach, but I don't know what it's really called, something like that. And the Star from Free Willy bought the land and won't let anybody on that beach anymore. He calls the police if anybody lands on the beach. And so it really does depend on the people. Like, Point Dowdy is DNR on the northwest tip. So I wanted to go look at that a couple years ago, and I was just driving around, so I parked at Camp Orkyla and then hiked up the beach at low tide. And I was always constantly worried someone was going to yell at me, but nobody did. And then this last summer, I wanted a picture for the guidebook, so that friend of mine, he builds skin-on-frame kayaks. He lent me a woman and a kayak, a double kayak.
Cool.
And so it was really fun. We paddled that kayak out to Point Dowdy, and so I could take a picture. But yeah, it's really dicey with people. I don't know if we could ever get that here.
Yeah, there's probably so many vested interests against it that it will never happen.
And because I started truffle hunting with him, I got an app called ONX. Have you heard of that? ONX, like Onyx.
Yes.
And it's amazing. Somebody put in all the parcels into Onyx. So wherever you are, you can poke your finger on a parcel and see who owns it and if you can walk across it. And so I think that's really handy. I use it all over.
Washington's where does it encompass?
I think it's nationwide,
Yeah,
actually.
It's every state of the entire
Oh,
United
really?
States.
Because our family has some waterfront on the island, and we're in there.
Somebody can see it.
It was actually,
I mean, we don't care, people walk across our, we grew up walking across everybody's beach when I was a kid.
Oh, that's nice.
Well, and, I mean, people just walk up and down all the beach along, our shoreline.
it was actually made for public hunting.
Yeah.
Public land, of what the priority of it was, creation, and then, they've kind of upgraded it to, I think they've got waterways now, they've got, backcountry hiking, they've just kind of like made different versions of the same thing to encompass different demographics of what people want to do.
Yeah, I think I read about it in the New York Times, and it was a really fun article because the hunters, it was out, I don't know if it was Montana or Arizona, somewhere like that, and they wanted to access this public land to go hunting, and the parcels were squares, you know, so they were they figured out they could step from this parcel to that parcel, kind of, and
Diagonally?
yeah, and the landowners were just furious because, you know, they actually pulled it off. They had 1 foot on private land and the next foot was on public land, but it was a corner. So I thought that was really funny. But I'm also in real estate, so when I sold my domain name in about 2010, when I had my web design business, I thought, well, what should I get into? So I got into real estate. And so because of that, I know more about waterfront properties. And I actually I didn't ever sell it. It had a fire, so it was really hard to sell, and the owner was in California, but his parcel jogged, so that, you know, you have to really pay attention. His parcel went down the hill on Chuckanut Drive, and then it hit the railroad tracks, and then it jogged over, and then owned the tidelands going pretty far out. And then meanwhile, this other person's property, you know, was in front of their waterfront property was in front of his house. So it's hard to say who owns what tideland, and sometimes the tribes still own a lot of the tidelands, and you have to be careful of that. And the oyster farmers and other people. But yeah, it would be nice if we could do that, but like Hobart Beach, you know, that's all tribal, but you have to pay to go on it. It's not too much money. And then you have Shai Shai and all the 1, 2, and 3 beaches out there.
One thing where I'm originally from, in Wisconsin, is a lot of the saying like private land access to waterways is all of the islands on the waterways are public land.
Huh.
So while you can't like access, or you can't dock and camp on the banks of the river, you can camp and like dock on the islands of the river. It's all accessible to.
Oh, that's nice.
Even if it's privately owned, I mean, are they
Yeah.
privately owned islands?
No.
Okay.
I mean, some of them might be, but they still fall under the same.
Well, they still have to allow people to. Wow.
Yeah, we lost our secretary. Well, actually, we lost one of our presidents, and then Tomas was the secretary, and he said he would be the acting president, and then he became the president and acting secretary. So I've been advertising the newsletter for a new secretary for months. Finally, this woman her name is Mercus. She's originally Cuban, and her dad made her name up, so in Spanish it sounds a little different. But she was born in Florida. She's an immigration attorney with 2 children and a husband. And they all went to Scotland recently to go kayaking. They found an outfitter. And she was so excited. She goes, well, in Scotland it's great. I even heard this from her children out of the Kayak Academy last week. They can stop and camp anywhere they want, right? But there's no facilities. So there were no restrooms, and sometimes they had to get the water out of some decrepit place and, you know, boil it and pray. So she got back here with a whole new appreciation of having, you know, a water trail with camping and bathrooms and fresh water, which is kind of a different perspective than just access to the water, you know.
Do you know, there's a young woman who's currently paddling around Ireland, circumnavigating Ireland. She's from Bainbridge Island.
Oh,
I'm blanking out on her name. My husband follows her on Facebook. I'm not on
She's on
Facebook.
Facebook, right?
Oh, do you know?
Yeah,
You
I
have
don't, I know, I've seen it.
she's, I can't wait until she's gonna have to make some kind of a documentary or write a book or something.
Presentation.
yeah, a presentation.
Anyway,
Thank
she's
you.
a phenomenal young woman.
Oh.
She's a dancer, she's an actress, she's an outward bound leader, she's done, kayaking, and she's hiked all over the world. I don't know how she does this, who funds her or what, but she's amazing, and she's circumnavigating Ireland.
Oh,
Pretty much solo. She gets support in places, and people are following her and
yeah.
making sure that she's going to be okay. But she had a harrowing experience just recently. She almost died.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, I thought I could.
Wonder when she'll be back.
Well, she's going to have to. If she doesn't complete this, she'll have to finish it later because the weather's just going to get too.
Maybe she could be our December speaker.
Oh.
But Chris Duff did that. Do you know him? I guess he's kind of older now, but he lives in Port Angeles, and he's famous for all these things. He was a marine diver to begin with, like Navy diver. And I remember when I lived in Port Townsend, I went out to Port Angeles, and he created some kind of pod thing, like that would, to take out on the ocean.
Oh.
And that worked pretty well, but then he did circumnavigate Ireland himself and wrote a beautiful book about it. And he also circumnavigated one of the islands in New Zealand. So he's a great writer, so his writing's like prose, very nice to read. And he just got back from solo sailing from Port Angeles to Hawaii and back. It was sad, his girlfriend, they were like married. She went hiking up, just on a day hike up at
I have her name.
not Mission Ridge, what's the ridge above Port Angeles? Hurricane, and she fell somewhere and had to go get extracted. And that didn't, that changed his life pretty much. And so he went on that sailing trip, I think, to kind of get it back together.
Do you have it?
I have her name, yeah. It's Ariel, Ariel, Gazarian.
Or
G-A-Z-A-R-I-A.
maybe if Carol gets it, Carol can give it to me. Or I can put it in my phone. I can put it in the computer too. But
she posts regularly with her adventure.
Ariel
Gazarian.
I love that. I did a lot
She
of.
has a Facebook.
Oh yeah, here she is.
August 23rd, she was in Drogheda, Ireland. And then she'll land, and if weather gets bad, she'll go up and she entered a dance competition one time because the weather got so bad, so she had to camp for, going to town for a few days until the weather passed. There was a dance competition going on. She's a dancer, so she's crazy. She's wonderful.
What kind of dancing?
She was theatrical dance. My husband knows her because he was in a production at Bainbridge Performing Arts when she was just a young.
Oh.
Even then she was talented and sang tunes. So,
Yeah, she
so
might be a
that's
good
how-
speaker.
She would probably be an excellent speaker.
Yeah. I'm hoping to have there's the pub in Seattle, in Ballard, called Stone's Throw. They're all over, actually. And so on Tuesdays, once a month, they have a nonprofit thing where you can bring all your people, and then they donate some of the proceeds back to you. So I agreed to do one in December, which is around the, Giving Tuesday, end of year. And I thought I might tag team pretty well They've got really good barbecue too, which I love. So she might be good to have at that.
So this was something, Sea Kayak Ireland, this is by Ariel Gazarian, though, she said, I'm still going strong on my circumnavigation of the country and excited to be the guest speaker at the ISKA Symposium in Mulroney this year. It's been a total adventure and I've been meeting so many wonderful people along the way. And so she obviously does presentations.
Yeah.
What is her last, how do you spell it?
Gazarian.
And the first name is Ariel.
Ariel. And it looks like her website, well, I don't know what that is. Check her out.
Well, thanks. That's awesome. Does anyone have any other questions? No? Are you two just trying to find out more about water trails for DNR or for yourself or
Both.
both?
I think someday I'll get a sea kayak.
Okay,
And we'll love to do this kind of stuff, so I think this is like my slow introduction.
yeah.
Oh, well, I was 65 when I got my first sea kayak and started kayaking.
Hopefully it
so-
won't wait that long, but who knows?
Yeah, don't wait that long. Don't do it while you're young. I highly recommend it. So
Yeah, and adventures are good. I mean, I've done on a lot. I took my Dawn Treader, which I need to either give that away or something, to Baja. I led 10-day sea kayaking trips in Baja for 3 winters in the late 80s. And I had to do some solos because my boss said, well, you can't lead a trip around Punta Pulpito until you've seen it. So, I had to go and do it on my own, which luckily it was nice weather. And then I've gone down the Fulufu River in Chile and Lake Titicaca in Bolivia, and there's all kinds of places. And I was able to I used to certify sea kayak instructors for the ACA. So I got to go to Hong Kong 3 times, and
wow.
there's some really cool places to paddle over there. I found out, like where the Outward Bound, I went to Outward Bound to certify their instructors, and they were really great, but they reminded me of a lot of guides where you don't really, I mean, not all guides, but sometimes guides will just be guiding in doubles, and they won't really learn about how to sea kayak, and they won't learn the technique or how many different kinds of sea kayaks there are and paddles, or they won't learn how to roll, So that's how they were in Hong Kong for the Outward Bound instructors. They were the best instructors I've ever seen in terms of teaching techniques. And we always try to get them to use different techniques other than lecturing like this. So it was really fun. But the Outward Bound campus was on flat water. It never got bad, but they had a big, huge motorboat, and we were able to put 15 kayaks, single kayaks on the motorboat, and then go up the coast until we found a place where there was some surf and chop. And then, they could see how they could handle that. But they hardly ever got into that kind of thing, which is true of a lot of sea kayakers. So I always tell sea kayakers they should take whitewater paddling lessons to actually get some skills down, so that when you get in rough water, you know what you're doing. But that's kind of a different subject, but
Well, thank you.
yeah.
Yes, thank you.